Hello, and welcome to Media Literacy Week in the United States, hosted by, namely, the National Association for Media Literacy Education, which was established in 2015. I am Stephanie Flores Coolish. I'm the namely board vice president, and I'm also a teacher educator at Loyola University, Maryland, where I direct a program called Curriculum and Instruction for Social Justice. Welcome to our webinar today. We're really excited to have you, and what we're titling this is Looking Forward to It. It's a conversation with the members of our Media Literacy Alliance about media literacy recently and in the years ahead. We're really fortunate today to have three of the directors of Alliance organizations, which include Susan Friedman, who is the Senior Director at the National Association for Education of Young Children. We have Emily Kirkpatrick, who is the Executive Director of the National Council for Teachers of English. And we have Larry Pasca, who is the Executive Director of the National Council for the Social Studies. And so we're going to have a wonderful conversation today. Thank you all for being with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can be looking at each other to start our engaging conversation. And let's just start out with a basic question about how you all have been working with the Alliance for a few years now. And I wonder how the push for media literacy education has changed or has evolved through your organizations in that time. Let's start with Larry.
Well, thank you very much, Stephanie, and welcome everyone. I hope you had a great Media Literacy Week so far, and that you can continue media literacy advocacy and support throughout the year. At NCSS, we issued our first media literacy position statement in 2016, and that was actually the year I came to NCSS. And so since that time, we as an organization have had a consistent focus on media literacy throughout all of our professional learning and publications programs. We have featured articles, we've featured workshop sessions and clinics, we've had guest speakers, we focused on summer institutes, and we became a firm supporter of Media Literacy Week itself during that time. We've also hosted Summit with NAMLI, we've done programs independently as well, and we tend to revise our positions on issues on a 5 to 7 year cycle. We actually revised our media literacy statement in 2022. It was about 2 pages. We expanded it to include specific teaching resources and links to other associations like NAMLI and other nonprofit organizations that are in the space of providing instructional resources for media literacy. We've participated as well with NAMLI's conference and with other education conferences over the years as well. We've joined together in that shared programming. So I think it's fair to say for us in social studies, media literacy is a major focus. It addresses our core mission, which is to provide leadership, service, and support to educators. And we also see media literacy as a vital foundation in our approach to inquiry in the social studies and the inquiry framework that we've been promoting nationwide over the past decade.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, rich information coming out of the NCSS for sure. Susan, what about your organization? What are some ways that you have pushed for media literacy education change, and how has it evolved?
Hi, everybody, and thank you. I'm Susan Friedman. I'm Senior Director of Publishing and Content Development at the National Association for the Education of Children, NAYC. And NACE is a national association, a professional membership organization for early childhood educators. And we work to promote high quality early learning for all young children, birth through age 8. And we do this in a number of ways with our members and affiliates across the country. We do create position statements, and we do have one on technology and interactive media for young children, but they really are situated within a couple of core position statements that are key to the early childhood profession and teaching and learning. And that is, we have a new position statement on advancing equity and early childhood education, and also a position statement on developmentally appropriate practice and early childhood education. And so, and there are a number of other other core position statements, including a code of ethical conduct. And media literacy sort of sits within that. It's a piece of what early educators do. Within the past couple years since we've been involved with this alliance, some of the things that have changed are basically, it's been a very hard time for early childhood educators, and it's been a very hard time for the profession. I mean, during the time of COVID, that sort of really came up and was emphasized, but a lot of programs are still having issues with staffing. And so that's kind of just the overarching context in which we're functioning and paying attention to, but that's been a big change. We've been exploring the topic of media literacy and early childhood education within these contexts. And media literacy is probably somewhat different in early childhood than it is for older children. And so some of it is engaging adults and educators in thinking about what is media literacy. Media literacy has largely been thought about within a public health framework. How much time, safety, what's the adult's role in protecting children from media? And while that is important, one thing we've done in this time frame is published a book on media literacy by Faith Rogo, which I'm going to be talking about quite a bit. I'll hold, I don't know, you can see Media Literacy for Young Children, Teaching Beyond the Screen Time Debates. And what she's trying to do in this book is frame media literacy as an educational and pedagogical concept for teachers to engage in. And so this is really a fantastic resource that sort of frames this for early childhood educators. How do I think about this and the broad range of all the things that I'm doing? And also for people interested in media literacy, like what does this mean in early childhood? And then one other piece within this time frame, and I'll wrap up my answer to this question, is just equity has really been on our minds. NAEYC has somewhat recently published a new position statement on advancing equity. And in an upcoming issue of our journal, Young Children, which will be a winter issue, so it's coming out in a couple of months, we have an interview with Amanda Armstrong where she's really talking about thinking about media related to representation, who's represented, and what are you showing to children in your classroom, and who's represented, and also how are we thinking of all children as media creators? Are we really equipping all children with the tools to be able to think of themselves as not just understanding media, but creating media?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Great work coming out of your organization for sure. And Emily, how has the push for media literacy education changed or evolved through NCTE in this time that you've been a part of the Alliance?
NCTE has really evolved our attention and our view of media literacy parallel to the creation of the Alliance. When the Alliance was first forming and we were planning the inaugural meeting, which I recall as being just a week or so before the pandemic even began, when those conversations were underway, NCTE had a group of members come forward stating and encouraging the organization to have a fresh approach for media literacy within the English language arts. And NCTE had historically done some important things and had a constituency within the organization very passionately and affectionately tied to media literacy, but it was honestly, always sort of a satellite, an attached piece to English language arts. And with the new work that we've taken on since early 2020 until now, media literacy has become an embedded part of English language arts. And that has been a foundational change and an intentional one. It was led by a group of members that were appointed to create a plan to move NCTE forward. And because we ask for and we nurtured a plan, what you see today is indeed a holistic approach. Last year, we issued a very important position statement on media education and English language arts. It was issued not without its own controversy, but as we look back at it over a year later, the wisdom in that piece and the insight as attached to student experience today and what we desire for all students to have an experience that leads to a well-rounded, vibrant education, media literacy must be a part. And NCTE has published a number of policy briefs and special issue publications regarding media education in the English language arts. We are deeply and actively concerned about the equity issues, equity both of experience as well as the development of media tools and technologies. And you will see us leaning into that increasingly as time moves forward. You know, the presence of media education is named quite rather explicitly in NCTE's definition of what literacy is in a digital age. And so we're now fully carrying that through and passionately doing so.
Great. Hopefully our viewers see why we invited these three panelists to join us, all wonderful advocates of media literacy education. So I'm going to pivot a little bit because a lot of what's at the top of the minds of many of us today, especially in education, is the proliferation of artificial intelligence and the changing nature of technology, deep fakes and things like that. They obviously have a connection to media literacy, but I'm wondering how your organizations have responded to some of these changes in technology. And I'll open this up to anyone who has, some information, because one of the things I've realized is that this is such a fast moving train that I think we're all kind of needing to get on board to find out how to respond.
Well, I'm happy to begin in social studies just very briefly. We've already published a significant amount of content over the past year, journal articles focusing on kind of what is AI and how would tools like ChatGPT be used both for instruction, but also, looking at safeguards around, how do we know students are producing original work? What does that look like? I think the difference with AI is that a lot of times when innovations come up, we spend a lot of time in education struggling with, would this work? How would this work? Should we push back against this? I think we've taken this approach of it's here. We know it's here. We know it's growing. We need to address it. So I think the idea of challenging it, fighting it, restricting it is less the focus, and more of the focus is on how do we work with this responsibly, ethically now? How do we help prepare our kids for how tools like AI could be useful? And then to your point about deep fakes, misinformation, that's also been a part of our work over the past few years, and why to us media literacy and this alliance is so vital is that we can't do it alone. We recognize that all disciplines have a stake in how we foster accurate information literacy, and tools like ChatGPT, others, they're going to complicate things, but they also give us opportunities. And so when we talk about skills that we develop, like historical thinking, geographic reasoning, we realize that these are tools that may help us, but we have to steer the ship on this. We can't allow the tools themselves to take over. So in addition to journal content, we actually have a webinar this month. We've had other programs over the past year in our monthly webinar series that address different uses of technology. We have a very vibrant technology community. So like many other associations, we have special interest groups that address key topics in our discipline. Our technology community is very vibrant. They often set up a pretty significant space at our annual conference where they're not just sharing tools and resources, but talking about the implications of these in instructional practice. I invite viewers to look at, just like with Emily and Susan's conferences, take a look at our conference program. Come to our conference. You're welcome to come. We'll be in Nashville December 1st through 3rd, and we have a lot of sessions that focus on the uses of technology. In addition, our strategic plan, nurturing innovation, is one of our core strategic priorities that we're addressing in the next few years. We've invited our members to form a task force to look at not how we allow technology to drive social studies, but how social studies can drive the future innovations that we're going to need in our professions. So we're trying hard as an association, again, to flip the script of reacting to technological innovation and instead be forward thinking about how technology impacts our discipline and what kinds of tools we need to use to do social studies effectively. One quick anecdote to share. We have a new student essay contest called the 1787 Prize. We just launched it last year. Every year, students in grades 11 and 12 can submit an original essay on a different aspect around the Constitution. We launch it at Constitution Day. The deadline is usually the end of March. And the very first thing our selection committee talked through last year is, how do we know these are our original works? How do we put guardrails around our rubrics so that we are celebrating original work, but we are in no way encouraging students to, AI their response? So, again, I think that's a testament to how our members and our community is already thinking about the impact of changing technology in our practice. Again, we're not waiting for it to take over us. We're addressing it head on. And the good news is our committee did a great job last year in awarding our first prize winners.
I'm just going to jump in next. So that's really interesting, just discussing how many journal articles you've published on this. And I will share that we are actually looking for some thoughtful submissions on articles. We have received some, but they're very general. Oh, teachers could use it in planning their curriculum. Teachers could use it in lesson planning. But there's nothing that really is like walking through how to use AI potentially in relation to developmentally appropriate practice, and also like where the pitfalls are. So for example, I just recently read some descriptions of some research that had been done on someone who had explored using AI to teach phonics, which would be something that early childhood teachers would be focused on. And it really failed in some ways. Like, it suggested lessons and words that were not appropriate for the skill level, even though the teacher put in that information. So I think NAEYC has the concept of intentional teaching and the intentional teacher, which I'm sure many of our organizations have, and it's really connected to developmentally appropriate practice. And so even if there's a guideline in developmentally appropriate practice that says, here's how you approach something, you need to think about it from your own context, the specifics of the children in your program and what's happening. And I would say, using AI would be the same for educators using it in their lesson planning. The other area where there's been some discussion of interest and is in relieving administrative burden, right? Like that there's a lot on early childhood programs that have to fill out a lot of forms, meet a lot of requirements. So what are the ways concretely that programs have used it? We've received some content submissions that are in theory, and we're really looking for something that sort of walks through some of the advantages, some of the disadvantages, and some of how intentional educators have approached this and thought this through.
Building on that, NCTE has embraced a listen and lead model where we're publishing guidance and concerns and warnings about platforms and emerging technologies. And we're also embracing the world in which we live. So we want to continue to be socially responsible and apply criticality. At the same time, we have called for and have been so excited to receive input from teachers about how they're already using it. And that has come with identification of the promising teaching opportunities that they've experienced. And we're working to share those in a variety of ways. And we've been equally pleased to receive testimonies of what hasn't worked, because that can save others time and effort and enrich student experience. So it's a listen and a lead, and I think embracing that we're all in a high energy, fast-paced time where many issues, including technology and including media, but also including many other things, are at play. And we have to always hold criticality really close, but not at the risk of pushing away opportunities that can enrich our futures and our student experiences. You see NCTE holding ongoing conversations and sandbox opportunities for teachers to come and learn how to use some practical technologies, whether that's annotation or the use of particular platforms in classrooms, all the way to policy briefs that are far more reaching into the future. And so we're trying to steward the short and the long-term interest and move everyone along. We've been really pleased to fund a new project at NCTE that's facilitating digital dialogue among classrooms in the country. And I'm really excited and passionate about how we might scale this to model both responsible and productive public language among students, as well as technology-driven communication. And so it's a great time of innovation that's rooted in our values. And I know that's important for us all to embrace as individuals as well as collective entities.
Wonderful. And it's a great segue to another topic that I think overlaps with the ways in which you all discussed AI and how it's about engaging in education over avoidance, or embracing critical questioning over bans. And so back to you, Emily. I know that NCTE is deeply engaged in the fight against book bans. And of course, one of NAMELY's core principles of media literacy education, also it emphasizes that censorship is the antithesis of competent media literacy practices. We really obviously encourage asking critical questions of texts. So what does the next year of this work in advocacy look like for NCTE?
Well, it certainly includes continuing the fight to protect intellectual freedom and teachers' freedom to choose what should be taught. And in the case of English language arts, the books that a teacher chooses to teach as part of an academic year. But in addition to that, there's a real concentration on modeling what effective and responsible public language looks like, and how we can support teachers in engaging their students in this work. Hence, the concentration of the effort I mentioned a few minutes ago with the Democratic Dialogic Project that's rolling out in the country. I think there's a great responsibility that we all have, and you will see NCTE talking about that, inclusive of media and inclusive of technology. As part of this, you also see NCTE advocating that it's a teacher's responsibility to be aware and conversant in media education, as well as the responsibilities, for example, with anti-racist teaching. And so it is such a demanding time to be a teacher. And yet it's important to continually embrace new and emerging things such as technologies and the growing bearing that media education has on the lives and the futures of our students.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hear that from the teachers I teach a lot about the growing demands, but at the same time, there's a strong desire to engage in critical teaching. So NCSS and the National Council for History Education, I know, recently held an equity summit, and a lot of your conversation was focused on curriculum censorship. So how are teachers in your organization, Larry, dealing with this issue of book bans and anti-racist education? How are they working to protect and sustain themselves in their profession this year?
I think a lot of this is really starting with our ability to convene educators nationwide and share stories that we are not alone, that even in places where bans or censorship issues may not be prevalent, we're very mindful that they could be, or that sometimes it just takes a question at a board meeting, for example, for the issue to suddenly become very contentious in a community. So it starts with sharing those stories. The summit last week was a really good example of that. We also were an event planner with NCHE in a separate event called the Freedom to Teach, which was at Flagler College in Florida at the end of September. That was also a dialogue, not just with teachers. I moderated a panel there for educators. We also had panels for higher education professionals, cultural institutions, public historians, journalists, all talking about really the importance of what's going on in this moment and what we can do to, I guess, maybe help educate the world on what it is we really do. So there's an issue with, we don't ever encourage breaking the law. There's always following the law, but building awareness of what really happens in a social studies classroom. So for example, if a community member is shouting that, critical race theory is happening in the classroom and students in this classroom are being indoctrinated and that can't happen, we, instead of pushing back by saying, no, it's not, instead using language that's affirming what does happen in a classroom, how the classroom space is a space for inquiry, for learning, how it is important for us to have access to a full range of primary and secondary sources for us to do our jobs. In tandem with that, NCSS last year re-released a code of ethics for our profession. Our code of ethics is focused on what it means to be a social studies professional. And we use that language often with all public partners, with the media, to talk about the fact that as professionals, we are driven by ethics, ethical practice. That ethical practice includes a focus on using media responsibly, having access to a full range of sources so that we can achieve the standards and help kids achieve success in our subject area. And that ethical practice also means that we always put students' interests at heart, that we work on developmentally appropriate learning. I think another change for us of what we're doing to help educators this year is we have a robust network of affiliates. We have affiliates in over 50 areas, including states, regions, and local communities. And typically we work with our affiliates in supporting them. If they have an issue in their community, we'll back their play, so to speak. What we're finding now is we often are working with them to be the dominant voice in their area. So for example, writing letters to state legislatures, to state boards of education in support of standards, or saying the standards process you're doing is harmful and it's actually likely to create issues where censorship and other things that don't help kids, don't help teachers are happening. So we're leveraging our affiliate network, I think, now more than ever. Our summit that you described, we're continuing it throughout the year. We're going to actually host follow-up sessions both at our conference and at the NCHE conference in March of next year. Continuing with this discussion, also a follow-up webinar as well. We don't see the Equity Summit as a one and done issue, so to speak, but this is going to be ongoing in our programming throughout the year. I do want to stress one thing, which is the importance of partnerships for us right now. One of the ways that we're dealing with issues of censorship, book banning, and academic freedom in general is joining groups like this Media Literacy Education Alliance. We're members of the National Coalition Against Censorship. We're members of the Civics Now Coalition. We belong to over a dozen different coalitions. We believe there's strength in numbers with associations. And what we're trying to help our members understand is that when you have issues, please come to us. Please come to your professional associations, because we can uplift your voice better as an association when you're with us. But we also want all of our members, and hopefully all the viewers watching this today, to know that your associations do work together through coalitions to address these topics at both the highest levels and directly in your communities. And it is through our collective voice that we hope to make a profound difference in turning this conversation around to a more productive one about what does the kids actually need to be successful in school? How can we help our kids? How can we help our teachers? Right now, the conversation is not helping our teachers be successful. So we just want to turn that conversation around through alliances and coalitions such as this one.
Great. Emily, did you have something to add?
Yes, but I was politely making sure Susan didn't want to jump in. NCTE is continuing its work through its Office for Intellectual Freedom, where we offer 24/7 support for teachers who are experiencing or perceive that they may be on the brink of experiencing censorship in the classroom. One thing that we see and advocate for around this is to center students first. And if students' interest in particular reading materials are centered first, that tends to elevate the conversation beyond the local politics or perhaps the state-driven politics that get in the way. Again, I think of what all three of us see as so valuable about a well-rounded education that everyone should be entitled to. So increased advocacy for student interest is I think a growing area that yields a lot of value.
Great, thank you so much. And definitely to Larry's point about the coalition building, you know, I feel like I've been enriched when listening to the Alliance conversations around topics like this, because I can see that they're feeling more supported, that they see that each other's organizations are kind of contending with similar topics that, again, come back to the idea of educating students to ensure that they're asking critical questions, which is a major component of media literacy education. Another component that, Larry, you raised that I wonder if, Susan, you might speak to is the idea of advancing developmentally appropriate practices for young children. And I'm wondering if you can discuss how this plays out in the context of media literacy education.
Yeah, I love talking about developmentally appropriate practice. We have a position statement that was updated recently, so I want to make sure people are looking at the most recent version of the position statement that's on our website that is heavily influenced by our equity position statement. And also we have a new version of the developmentally appropriate practice book. And it's, you know, basically it's a framework for teaching, and it's a framework in which teachers can think about media literacy along with all their other responsibilities and things they're thinking about. So if you look at the parts of developmentally appropriate practice, there's the principles of child development and learning, which really outline, there are 9 principles of child development and learning that outline the research base behind developmentally appropriate practice. Of course, there's not time for me to go through each one. But one of the principles is really summed up by for children to learn and feel and be comfortable in a space and do their best learning, they have to feel a sense of belonging, purpose, and agency. And so I think a lot of what we're talking about in terms of representation and equity in the classroom has directly to do with children's success in school. Like, do they see themselves in the books and other media in the classroom and in the school or not? And so that is one piece that the book bans focused on. There's certain populations, there's certain things that people feel uncomfortable about, they're banning. And I also just want to connect with what Larry talked about, which is just shifting the dialogue to saying, no, that's not what we're doing, to here's why we chose this book. Here's why we're choosing this. Here's why we're studying this. And that's something that we're emphasizing, both related to developmentally appropriate practice and teachers are really understanding why they're selecting things. And, you know, Faith in her book describes media as being children's books, media as being, you know, not just thinking of media as like, you know, TV or digital media or video, but also children's books, and that teachers can build their muscle doing this by saying, okay, I'm choosing to read this book because we live in this community in North Carolina where there are black bears, and we're having a scientist come and talk about black bears, and this is going to cover some of the information that he's going to be talking about. You know, I'm reading this book because I think it's a funny story that we can all identify with, and some of us may recognize our families in this book as we read. I mean, so I was part of a webinar on literacy and diverse books, and there was a teacher that was talking about quiet bans. So this idea that some things are banned and then teachers are afraid to use certain materials. And this teacher had really developed her muscle, even going and speaking to the school board when someone raised, like, I have concern about this book, I have a concern about this book. How, you know, how she developed that skill, I don't know exactly, but I think teachers describing why they've chosen something and why they're using it and explaining it to children is one connection to developmentally appropriate practice. One other piece that I just want to emphasize, and I talked about how we have these position statements that are all connected, is we have a code of ethics that is under revision right now. and there is discussion about some topics related to AI and media literacy. And so we're really hoping people will tune in, come to the NAEYC website and sign up to get our email address. I mean, our emails and things, so you can be alerted as to when there's like a call out to the public, a call out to our members, but to the education community at large for feedback. And then just connecting to what Emily talked about is elevating teacher stories. We feature teacher stories in a number of our materials, and we really would like to receive more stories related to how teachers are thinking about media literacy in relation to developmentally appropriate practice. I spoke with one kindergarten teacher who described that they did these like public service announcements on what is the coronavirus back, and sort of like, what's the information that they knew, what was the misinformation, how do they understand the sources, and then the kids each did these little videos using different images and pictures, and that's something that we're interested in hearing about. What are teachers doing? What are educators doing?
Thank you so much. And I know, Larry, you have to jump off. I wonder if you want to just wrap up in the last couple seconds.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity today to be with Emily, with Susan, with you, Stephanie. I would say, what we're doing in media literacy education is we are working together. As you see above me, our conference theme, and I think the driving theme of our year, is working in harmony for a better tomorrow. While we do continue to fight for the relevance of social studies in classrooms, we continue to encourage that social studies exist in early childhood education, exists in the elementary school. We also know that only fighting for that is not enough. What we also need to do is look at, how are we inclusive? How do we, I'm quoting our conference sub-themes here, how do we transcend borders and see connections? One of the ways that we see media literacy as a foundation in our discipline is helping to be connectors, looking at what are advances in pedagogy, how do we not just mirror new developments, but actually help lead that. And we believe that part of leading that is cultivating networks, relationships, like through the Media Literacy Alliance, like with our partners, all on screen here. And so I think my parting words are, we are all in this together as educators. We do believe so strongly in the value of alliances like this one. And just to anyone viewing this today, know that media literacy is core to who we are as social educators. We know that it's core to all of us here in the organizations we represent on this in this program. And we stand to support you with quality sources, the ability to tap into historical thinking. And I think, as both Emily and Susan have said so well this morning, putting students at the forefront and giving them the guidance they need to just be successful, to be curious, to be empathetic, and for our teachers to know that we are here to support them, that they have the guidelines, the guidance, the tools needed. So again, to everyone, I would just say, please know that your organizations stand behind you. Join us, get active with us. We are only as strong as your voice is strong with us. And so we do want your participation and help guide us to this future where technology is vastly changing, the media landscape is vastly changing. And again, I appreciate the time to be with all of you, and hope you've had a wonderful Media Literacy Week.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thanks for joining us. Now, Emily or Susan, would one of you like to kind of close out with sort of some last comments about your organization's work related to media literacy in the time ahead?
I'll be happy to. Susan mentioned a lot about a few moments ago about choice and making clear why something's being taught. And it really reminded me so much of NCTE's approach. We talked about censorship a bit ago. I think it certainly applies to media education as well. Applying the intentionality for why you're pursuing something, while you're pursuing teaching a particular title or a particular unit, and what selections are in it and why. This is exactly why NCT has built a book rationale database for teachers to contribute to, as well as pull from and learn from, with great intentionality, why a particular title may have an incredible place in curriculum during an academic year. So the intentionality should lead it. And I think that's a major theme in what's discussed in the Media Alliance meetings every quarter, the intentionality of moving forward with media education. It is not the thing to grab and let go of for 2 weeks a year. It is something that's central, I think, to all of us on the Alliance. And I think that's been a really significant step forward over the last few years that the Alliance should really take a lot of credit for. Pulling this thinking together and ensuring that it's an ongoing part of thinking, and that each organization around the table has a great deal of intentionality with embracing new commitments on media literacy and media education.
Thank you so much, Emily. And Susan, final words to you.
Yeah, in the coming year, we're really looking to elevate and highlight educator stories, broadly speaking, related to developmentally appropriate practice and educator experience, but we're really interested in how people are using our media literacy for young children, Teaching Beyond the Screen Time Debates resource. We're looking into really considering equity. As we talk, as I talked about, we have something coming up that's talking about both representation and how educators are thinking about that. And then also really providing children with the tools to be thinkers and creators and to see themselves and thinking about those skill sets for all children. We're really just wanting to engage in thinking about developmentally appropriate practice as a frame, and how does media literacy fit into that. One of the principles of child development and learning is that children learn in an integrated fashion across subject matter areas. And I think there are probably many examples where media literacy could connect with that. And I think teachers particularly who are teaching children basic skills related to reading, math, I mean, they're looking for ideas and resources for connecting across, and just input on our position statements as we develop them, particularly upcoming code of ethics. We really are hoping to receive lots of input from this group on that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. We really appreciate your time today to speak to the connections between your organization's work and media literacy education. I heard some really valuable ideas for educators and other media literacy advocates out there. The position statements, I guess that's one thing that I heard really loudly and clearly that exist for all three of your organizations. And teachers should know that those types of position statements are valuable for you when it comes to a time that you need to justify or uplift or validate the kind of teaching that you are doing. And so do refer to their websites to find those position statements that have been so thoughtfully composed, and definitely lots of connections and ties with asking critical questions about the media texts in our world today. And of course, teachers, be sure to, of course, check out the core principles on Namely's website for also some wonderful grounding principles that can guide the work that you wish to do in your classrooms. And share those stories. Susan, I have some stories that I think I'll be able to share with you from some of the students that I've taught, and I'm sure there's a lot of other people out there that wish to share some wonderful stories with these terrific organizations. So again, thank you, viewers. Thank you for spending your time with us, and happy Media Literacy Week.